Hey, and welcome to our next session. I believe this is session 18 in our series of lessons dealing with music theory made easy. Now, if you haven't done so, hit subscribe, hit like, ring the bell so that you can get notifications when we post something. Now, let's get started. In our last session, we dealt with triads. And if you remember, a triad is three tones, three notes, or three pitches played simultaneously. Boy, I said that word again. Now, but three notes, three tones, or three pitches played at the same time. So now, what we want to do is we want to just try to go over what we did in our last session dealing with triads, and let me get out of the way so that you can see what we did. All right, we're in the key of C. We use C. It's a common key, so we just use C as our example key. But the formulas rather, that we use in triads, uh, in building chords or whatever the case is the same formula that you can use in all of the major keys. Okay, same formula that you can use in all of the major keys. Now, here we have the triad, C major triad, 135. Now, a triad is built in thirds. A third up from C is E. Then a third up from E is G. So that's 1, 3, 5. One more time. A third up from C is E, and then a third up from E is G. This is a major triad. Okay? It's a major triad. Now, in order to get a minor triad, we lower the third a half step. So the third of C is what? E. So we lower the third a half step, and that's going to give us a minor triad. Okay, one more time. In order to get a minor triad, you lower the third, which in this case rather is E. You lower the third a half step. That's going to give you a minor triad. Now let's move on. In order to get an augmented triad, you raise the fifth a half step. Okay? Remember what we said before. Flats, lower, sharps, raise. One more time. Flats, lower, and sharps, raise. So in this case, in order to get an augmented triad, again, doesn't matter what key it is, in order to get an augmented triad, you raise the fifth a half step. One more time, in order to get an augmented triad, you raise the fifth a half step. So let's move on. In order to get a diminished triad, you lower the third and the fifth a half step. One more time. In order to get a diminished triad, you lower the third and the fifth a half step. So in this case, you lower the E a half step and you lower the G a half step. So let's recap this one more time. This is your major triad, 1, 3, 5, C, E, G. We're just recapping. A triad is built on thirds. These triads are built on thirds. So a third up from C is E, and then a third up from E is what? G. All right. In order to get a minor triad, you lower the third a half step. One more time. In order to get a minor triad, you lower the third a half step. In order to get an augmented triad, you raise the fifth a half step. And in order to get a diminished triad, you lower the third and the fifth a half step. Now, these are just some of the commonly used triads. These are the triads that we use commonly in music. All right. We also talked about root position, first inversion, second inversion. Okay. Root position, first inversion, second inversion. We're still using the C scale. All right. Root position in any key is 1, 3, 5. That's root position in any key. 1, 3, 5. In this case, in the key of C, that's C, E, G. C is the 1, E is the 5, C is the 1, E is the 3, and then G is the 5. 1, 3, 5, that's root position. But now in order to get first inversion, then you start with the third, okay? And the third in this case is E. So first inversion would be 3, 5, 1. And in the key of C is E, G, C. 3, 5, 1. That's first inversion. But now we've got second inversion. And in order to get second inversion, we start with the fifth. And in this case, the fifth is G. So second inversion is 5, 1, 3, or G, C, E. Okay? That's second inversion. All right, one more time. Root position, 1, 3, 5. Always, and I don't care what key it is. If it's in A flat, it's still 1, 3, 5. And A flat is going to be A flat, C, E flat. Okay? In B flat, it's going to be B flat, D, F. Okay? 1, 3, 5 in any key. Okay? That's going to be root position. First inversion rather, is going to start with the third in any key. I keep saying second inversion, but first inversion is going to start with the third. In this case, the key of C, the third is E. So there's 3, 5, 1. Okay? E, G, C. 3, 5, 1. That's first inversion. Then if we go to the second inversion is 5, 1, 3. Again, in any key, it's going to be 5, 1, 3 for the second inversion. In this case, in the key of C, or the C scale, it's going to be G, C, E. Okay? Those are triads that we dealt with in our last session. So let me take this down, because what we want to deal with now is 7 chords. All right? What we want to deal with now is 7 chords. Now, the 7 chords is built on thirds as well. Okay, 7 chords is built on thirds as well. In this case, a third up from C is E, a third up from E is G, and then a third up from, G is B. Okay, one more time. A third up from C is E, a third up from E is G, and then a third up from G is B. Okay, 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, and up here, 1, 3, 5, and then B is the 7. Okay, 1, 3, 5, 7. Now, this 1, 3, 5, 7, this is a major 7. Okay, it's a major 7. Okay, 1, 3, 5, 7. Uh-oh, I lost my board. All right, there you go. Now, 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, things happen, all right? Things happen. But 1, 3, 5, 7 is a major 7 chord. Again, doesn't matter what key it is. Doesn't matter what key it is at all. It's still 1, 3, 5, 7 is a major 7 chord. Now, let's go to the next 7 chord, which is going to be a dominant 7 chord. Okay, it's going to be a dominant 7 chord. So a dominant 7 chord, you lower the 7th a half step rather. Okay, in a dominant 7 chord, you lower the 7th a half step, and that's going to give you a dominant 7 chord. Now, in this case, the dominant 7th chord is going to be C, E, G, and then you flat the B. Okay, you lower the B a half step, and that's going to give you a dominant 7th chord. Okay, you got your major 7 chord, 1, 3, 5, 7. Then you got your dominant 7 chord, which is 1, 3, 5, flat 7. Okay? Dominant 7 chord is 1, 3, 5, flat 7. All right? Now, let's move on to the next 7 chord. I'm going to hold it this time so it won't fall. All right? Let's move to this next 7th chord. The next 7th chord is a minor 7. Okay? It's a minor 7. In this case, you lower the 3rd and you lower the 7th rather, a half step. Okay, in a minor 7th, doesn't matter what key, you lower the 3rd and you lower the 7th a half step. And in this case, a minor 7th is C, E flat, G, B flat. Okay, that's going to give you a minor 7th chord. So there's 1, lower 3rd, G, and then a lower 7th. Okay, so one more time. In order to get a minor 7th chord, you lower the 3rd and the 7th a half step. Now, before we go on to the other two, let's go back. This is a major 7th chord, 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, it's a major chord, 1, 3, 5, 7. Dominant 7, you lower the 7 a half step. Okay, in this case, you're going to lower the B a half step. Now, don't listen. I don't want you to think that this is only for this key. One more time, and I know I keep repeating this, but I really want you to get this. These formulas is for all your major scales. Okay, all your major keys. These formulas can be done. Okay, it doesn't matter. E major, A flat majors, G major, doesn't matter. These formulas is for all major scales or keys. All right. So your dominant 7th chord, in order to get a dominant 7th chord, you lower the 7 a half step. Now, in order to get a minor 7th chord, you lower the 3rd and the 7 a half step. Okay. One more time, in order to get a minor 7th chord, you lower the 3rd and the 7 a half step. So let's move on. Now, a half diminished 7, you have your root, but then you lower the 3rd, you lower the 5th, and you lower the 7th a half step. Okay, in a half diminished 7. You lower you don't lower the root, but you got your root position. Then you lower the 3rd, you lower the 5th, then you lower the 7th. And that's going to give you a half diminished. Or in some cases, some people call it a minor 7 flat 5. All right? But this is your diminished chord. Okay, one more time. You lower the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. You lower all 3 a half step. That's going to give you a half diminished. Now, in order to get a full diminished 7, you lower the 3rd a half step, you lower the 5th a half step, but then when you get to the 7th, you got to double flat it. Okay? We're going to get the double flats a little later. But in order to get a full diminished 7, you lower the 3rd a half step, you lower the 5th a half step, but then you lower the 7th 2 half steps. Okay? One more time. A full diminish. You lower the 3rd a half step, you lower the 5th a half step, but the 7th, you lower 2 half steps. Okay? A double flat, you lower it 2 half steps. Okay? Now that's your 7th chords. Now we're going to review that in our next session, which I believe is session 19. We're going to review 7 chords, and then we're going to move on to something else. So as always, please remember to send your questions or your comments to musicmadeeasy2020@gmail.com. Remember, send your comments or your questions to musicmadeeasy2020@gmail.com. And I'll see you in session 19.